Welcome to Showdown. I'm Mark Kaysen, and it is Wednesday, and that is the 15th of May. And guess what? No trial today. Okay, it's been nice seeing you. I'm going later. No, that's a joke. Okay, it is funny, though, if you listen around today, the only thing that people are talking about, and I mean everywhere. I don't listen to Fox, so I wouldn't know. But I do know that Fox doesn't talk about it when there is a trial. So they're not going to talk about it when there isn't. So forget that. But, the real news people are talking about the trial all day long. They are evaluating everything that everybody has said. And they've pretty much said what I talked about yesterday. And just, to rehash a couple of quick things. In the first place, Cohen was good. And in fact, having heard more discussion of it last night, including the transcript being read and people in the courtroom having a chance to tell their stories of what they saw, it was better than it seemed yesterday. So anybody who's out here thinking that somehow Michael Cohen has done himself in, and I've read a few things around coming off of crazy right-wing sites saying that Michael Cohen destroyed the case of the prosecution. Well, you can say it, but I'll tell you what it's like. It's like at the end of March, anybody who said the Cardinals are going to be the best team in baseball this year, well, you couldn't dispute it because they hadn't played a game yet. Now, since they've played a game, you can take everything that was said about the Cardinals being good, and you can dump it in the trash can, which is where the Cardinals pretty much either deserve to be or have put themselves anyway. So pretty much the end of them. Well, now fast forward all of this over to Donald Trump and his trial. And yes, you can say right now that Michael Cohen destroyed the prosecution, that everything he said was so incredulous that nobody would ever believe a word of it. And that would be fine. You could keep saying that until the moment that the jury presents its verdict. Then you'd probably have to go crawl out of a room somewhere and go find the nearest bar and start drinking, because Michael Cohen did a great job. He very clearly outlined what the case is for the prosecution. Now, I'm not talking yet about the cross-examination. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the direct that came from the prosecution, and he laid it out. Of course, the prosecution wanted to sort of protect their case. And the way they did that is by telling every bad thing they could think of about Michael Cohen. He lies, he cheats, he obfuscates, everything that he does. He's not been good. However, there are changes that happen to people. And in the case of Michael Cohen, he has said, and I think very credibly, that he was sort of under Donald Trump's spell. And to think that that's crazy, don't. Because you got 70 million people in the United States who are currently under his spell. And on top of those 70 million, or let's put it this way, they were under his spell. Maybe they're not anymore. That may be over. But there's some who are under his spell. And in fact, I think it's about 7 or 8 now, Republicans who showed up at the courtroom. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But they're certainly under his spell. A whole bunch of people are under his spell. So Michael Cohen says that he learned, not soon enough to avoid jail, but he learned that what he was doing was not only bad, but it was counter to everything that he believed. So he says. I know people jump up and down and say, well, Michael Cohen is a great liar, and whatever he says, you can't believe. Yeah, he looks okay, but it's just acting. It's fake. And it's funny when people say that, because clearly that's Donald Trump. Trump is a liar. He never tells the truth. Never. You know, I was in a court situation where the jury came up and talked to me and my partner, Onion Horton, at the end, and they said, oh, don't even worry. We didn't believe a word they said after they gave their names. Honestly, I don't know that you can believe Donald Trump when he says his name, because he's probably got his fingers crossed and everything else. Look, the man is terrible. He is mentally ill. And by the way, a separate aside to all of that, I was listening to George Conway this afternoon. And George Conway is not only good, but he's funny. And what he did is he went on and on about Trump and everything that we know about him. And then he said, listen, Donald, he said, you're probably listening to this right now. And I just want to say to you, looking directly into your face, that you're a coward. And I know that you will never get on that stand tomorrow or any day, because you are a coward. And he went on and on with this. And first, he was right. And secondly, he really wanted to get Trump so riled up that maybe he would get on the stand, because that would be beautiful too. Because, you know, if Trump gets on the stand, he's got to lie, and then it's perjury. And then for sure he's in jail on top of anything else that comes up. So they really can't allow him to get on the stand unless he insists. Now, if he says to his attorneys, I'm going, I want to be on that stand, well, I guess that would be the end of that. And then he would tell us everything he's got to say. It would include just a gigantic number of lies. And that'll be the end of it. And then we'd all move on, because Donald Trump cannot get on that stand and speak in the courtroom, either to the people in the courtroom, the jury, or the country. He cannot do it and tell the truth. So his lying will do in their case and do in him, and it would be a perfect ending. But George Conway knows he's not getting on that stand. And that's it. Donald is not going to testify. As far as tomorrow, sure, Michael Cohen could get on and do some redirect after the cross-examination is over. And whether his attorneys want to put him through that or not, it's an interesting question. There are some things that they could talk about that I've heard discussed by numerous people on the air today. However, it's also been pointed out by Andrew Weissman, who's truly the best of the best, that there's really no sense in doing this, because whatever is going to be done has already been done in this case. And Michael was not touched yesterday by Todd Blanche, not slightly. And everybody has said this, I mean, repeatedly. I've probably heard 10 different people, knowledgeable prosecutors, who were either in the courtroom or talked to other people, read the transcript, and they all say the same thing. Donald was not touched during yesterday's testimony. It just wasn't. And really, I wouldn't have expected him to be anyway. I know there were things that people said during the testimony. They wondered why Michael would have done it one way or the other. And I thought to myself, look, none of us are in that courtroom, but surely anything that Michael says is going to go through the filter of Michael attempting to be a human being and to display himself as a human being to the jury, which means tell them how you feel. Tell them what happened in your life. And he did. He talked about how broken he was personally, having to go to jail, and the effect that it had on his family, and how it tortured him for his family to be so upset over him being in jail. Look, anybody that didn't feel that was honest probably wouldn't be a human being. So I'm going to say that the chances are great that those 12 jurors got the point, understand the situation, and will listen to what goes on tomorrow. Probably not hear any witnesses from Todd Blanche, although Blanche might feel, well, I got to put somebody on there. I got to say something as part of his case. So he might put on some expert witness to talk about the legal aspects, but a lot of people are saying he shouldn't do it. He should walk away from this and hope that there's some reasonable doubt on the part of one juror that would save Trump and turn this into a mistrial. I don't know. It's very hard to say. I guess if it were my call, I would tell him to put somebody on the stand, talk about the law very quickly, get the person off, and get out of the way. I mean, I would do that just to put somebody on, just not to walk away completely. If he walks away completely, I think the jury will conclude, no matter what he says, I think the jury will conclude that he just didn't feel like he had anything that he could say worthwhile, anything that would impress anybody that would show that he has confidence in where they're going. And so it might lead the jury to feel that, in fact, the Trump case feels defeated. And I'll tell you, if I were in their position, I would feel defeated. I've said over and over before this even started that I thought it would be a very strong case and that there would be a verdict against Trump very quickly. As it turns out, it looks like there's going to be a verdict even faster than anybody thought, certainly faster than I thought. And I'm no lawyer, so I wouldn't have even known, but I just thought it was going to happen quickly. And now I think it makes sense that it's happened quickly because there's really no case outside of what the prosecution has outlined. And if we come in here next week or even the following Monday and we find that 12 jurors have said that Donald is guilty, first, I'm not going to be surprised. And secondly, it's going to be the beginning of a whole new chapter in the history of our country because Donald will be on his way to jail. And so let me go a little further on this because, I've always thought, and I've talked about it in the last couple of weeks, that Donald would end up in jail because he couldn't live with the gag order. Well, I mentioned this yesterday. I mentioned yesterday that the people who were there for him, all these vice presidential wannabes, that they all came there to the courtroom in order to make Donald feel good and to say things that Donald couldn't say. But turns out it's actually much worse than that, because apparently they didn't come on their own. Apparently they were requested to show up there by Donald, and Donald was viewed in the courtroom writing notes next to everything that everybody was saying on his behalf outside the courtroom. People like this Governor Burgum guy, and Mike Johnson, Marco Rubio, whoever else showed up there. I don't even know which ones made it there additionally. But listen to this. And I mentioned this yesterday too, but it's worth saying it again. They all showed up in blue suits with red ties, looking like Donald. Isn't that embarrassing? I mean, why would they do that? I mean, this isn't a baseball team and they have a uniform. I mean, these people showed up dressed like Trump. And then what they did, and this is the real problem. I didn't mention this yesterday because I've said many times I'm not a lawyer, and I really didn't know the answer to this, and I really didn't even want to say it without being sure. But now I'm sure. So as it turns out, Donald, having written on paper what it is that he wanted these people to say, and then they going out in front of the court outside and speaking to the reporters on Donald's behalf, using Donald's language and violating the gag order, actually violates the gag order. This is a legal violation of the gag order. They can't go out there and say on his behalf, under his direction, this is the story, things about the judge's family, things about the jurors. They went out there and said, and I hadn't heard exactly this language, but they went out there and said that the jurors were not real Americans. So I mentioned yesterday intimidating the jury, and I thought it was fair to say that at any rate, whatever he was saying, I felt was essentially an intimidation of the jury. But the fact that the things that they said were not only intimidating the jury or an attempt to, but were being directed from Donald Trump to these VP wannabes dressed like him with red ties. This is pretty foolish. This guy can go to jail. I mean, I guess he doesn't understand that he can go to jail. He just doesn't seem to know really much of anything. He's so out of touch with not only the world, but with himself. He just doesn't understand how things work. I know that he feels, looking back, as we talked about yesterday, looking back to the Central Park Five, he feels that he can take a situation like that where these 5 kids, black kids, they were all found guilty of raping this woman in Central Park, white woman. And then, based on DNA, they were all vindicated as having done nothing. They weren't involved. They were exonerated, as Trump and his friends like to say, except for they lie. But in this case, it wasn't a lie. What they said was vindicated, that they had nothing to do with it. Now, did Donald walk away and just say, look, I made a mistake, understand, have a good life, see you later? No, he couldn't even do that. He came up with a full-page ad in the newspaper. I think it was the Post, but don't quote me. And he said, whatever's come up, they're guilty. Keep them in jail. Donald wanted to execute them, but they were found to have not done it. So, Donald really is feeling comfortable in a way, because he looks back at his life and he sees all the times that he has both preyed on people and taken advantage of people. So therefore, he sees nothing different here. He has no reason to believe that, number one, it's going to come out any differently than it has in the past for him. And number two, that anybody could ever stand up to him, because he's Donald J. Trump, whatever that is. And the truth is that he directed those wannabe Trump dress-up dolls to stand up in front of the court outside and say all the things that Donald wasn't allowed to say. And that's a violation of the gag order. It's that simple. They can't do it. The only reason I thought, well, maybe they can, is because maybe they have freedom of speech, which would allow them to go out and say things that Donald Trump wouldn't be allowed to say, and they were all public officials. So maybe I thought, but apparently I thought wrong, because it turns out that if you're under a gag order and you ask other people to speak up on your behalf, saying things that you're not allowed to say, then that's considered a violation. Obviously, he could be put in jail for that immediately. And I guess he's probably considered this, that maybe the judge wouldn't want to do it with a couple of days left in the trial. Maybe the judge just figures, leave him alone. The man's going to jail. Why do I want to mess with this? But hard to say. Depends on what kind of a person Mershon is. I wouldn't expect Mershon to react emotionally. In other words, I don't think he'd get angry, stomp up and down, and put Donald in jail. I don't think that's anything that could happen. And one of the things that was suggested today, I don't remember which person said it, but it was suggested today that the only way Mershon would respond to the gag order possibility would be if the prosecutors came in and asked for that. And then he'd have to. But it might be smart for Jack Smith. I'm sorry, wrong guy. Might be smart for the Manhattan prosecutors, Alvin Bragg, to decide, leave this guy alone, because he is very probably going to jail anyway. The trial is really at its completion. Why not just leave him alone and let him think he won? Let him think he did something. Let him think he tricked somebody. Now, I know that it's hard to say that, because, we all realize that Donald has done this all his life. And people are always concluding Forget it. It's not worth the trouble for various reasons. So maybe he'll escape one more time and feel empowered through that escape. Maybe. I don't know. But I know this. Everybody who has watched this is pretty confident that Donald Trump is in a whole lot of trouble and that he is on his way to a conviction that could come in a very short period of time. And once that conviction is in, well, then we're only waiting to hear what the judge says. And here's the other part that could really be Donald Trump doing himself in. The judge could say, why mess with this gag order business when we're at the end of the line? And when Donald is convicted, I'll give the guy some jail. He's going to get some jail. He's going to have to answer for his crimes, as did Michael Cohen. You know, that's the whole conversation here too, is that Michael Cohen went to jail. He went to jail. He left his family. He was miserable. He was broken as an individual. Now, people are saying, don't feel too sorry for him. He's not broke. He's just broken. But he's not broke. He's made $3 million apparently off of a couple of books, and he's making some money off of his podcasts. So they say, maybe. He's certainly getting something. He's got some money. He's got the ability to take care of his family, not in the style that they were doing before, but certainly in a style far above most people that live in the United States. So, okay, Michael's not destroyed that way, but he is broken in that the law license that he had is gone. So that identity has disappeared. And I understand somebody will go out there and say, well, what's the difference? So he's not a lawyer. He can do something else. He's writing books and he's doing podcasts. But you know what? Everybody has a way of seeing themselves. Even Donald Trump, through some very destroyed vision. I mean, his eyesight is horrific for him. I mean, he's a disaster. He doesn't know he's broken, but he's broken. I mean, all the things that have happened to him in his life. I mean, I know he thinks that he's won, but Al Capone thought he won too, till he found himself behind bars for tax evasion. So Donald will jump up and down and scream and say, well, you could have gotten me for 10 other things, but look what you got me for. What you got me for is not even worth talking about. However, it'll still be jail, Donald. It'll still be jail. So he's going to have to live with that. So he'll be a broken person too, although, again, he may not know it. He may think that when he's in jail, he may believe that he's actually in the Oval Office and that he's running the country. That's possible too. There's just no telling. Mary Trump says he is quite delusional and extremely ill. She's a psychologist. She ought to know. On the other hand, Michael Cohen has come across, even though he's broken, Lonnie Davis, his attorney, said yesterday, his former attorney, good friend, said, yeah, he's broken. He is. But he's made another life and he's going to move on with it. And in the meantime, he is coming across to the jury in a way that is very credible and honest from the standpoint of his personal feelings So in other words, you could say, I think this man is capable of lying. I think he would lie. I think he has lied. I think he's not exactly trustworthy, but we do have what they call the receipts. So when we look at the receipts and compare them to his statements, then we know whether there's truth or not, because you can't make up the receipts. Whatever documents they've got, those are real. And if the documents confirm that what Michael is saying is true, that's pretty much the end of the story. That would take care of the jury moving toward not a guilty verdict for Donald. I mean, he's guilty. Everybody hears that. Everybody knows he's guilty. Except for if you're watching Fox, you wouldn't know because you're probably getting weather reports. But truly, this man's in trouble. And most of the country knows he's in trouble, and most of the country will not be surprised if that jury walks into the courtroom and does exactly what I have said, which is finds him guilty and then moves on to the sentencing stage. I would have absolutely no sympathy for Donald Trump, and I don't think that Judge Merchan will have any either, except for potentially, I guess, to the standpoint, I mean, he's got 34 felony items that could bring 4 years each. So if you multiply 4 times 34, you've got 136, and, figure it out. Donald isn't going to live to be 136 plus 78. So there's no sense in doing that to him. And if he just gets 4 years, that makes the point for everybody. Ends the conversation. And actually, 2 years would be sufficient. And I've been saying that all along too. Any jail time at all, and that'll be the end of Donald Trump. And again, maybe 35% of the country will still vote for him. And I say 35, and I've said this many times, because if you go all the way back to Joe McCarthy, when he was completely disgraced, which Donald is about an inch away, he's disgraced, but not all the way. So you go back to Joe McCarthy in June of 1954, after Robert Welch did the entire, have you, come on, Kaysen. Anyway, he said, what's wrong with you, McCarthy? So anyway, on that day, McCarthy's support was down to 35%. It's amazing that he was at 35%, but it was down to that. And that's where it bottomed and stayed there, because there were always some people, despite McCarthyism and everything that we say, there were some people who were never going to leave McCarthy's side. Sounds like Donald Trump. And those are probably the same people. They're probably all the same people's relatives from 1954, 70 years ago. All those people who said, we continue to support McCarthy, will probably continue to support Donald Trump on the day that he gets convicted and sentenced. Okay. Now we're going to do some other things here in a minute after I take you to dinner. And I do want to take you to dinner because there's a great place for you to eat, as you well know, and that is Wenty's. Now, Wenty's is at 18,000 Chesterfield Airport Road in the Valley, and it's just a great place to eat. Everything there is just terrific. They have the wings. And you know, everybody loves the wings. Everybody, except me. I just don't eat wings. But they also have smoked meat and lots of different smoked meats. I know, I've heard lots of talk about it. I don't eat that either. I eat the baby back ribs. I mean, baby back ribs, that's fabulous food. Healthy, tastes great. I love it. And you will too. And I guarantee you, if you've got my taste for food as well, like the ribs, then you're going to love the onion rings too. Just great. I mean, you got to love the onion rings. So Wendy's is great for me, baby back ribs and onion rings, but you may also be interested in patty melts and hamburgers and the pizza. Wow. People love Wendy's pizza. They really do. It's just a great restaurant. And Ben is there waiting for your positive statements about how great the chef has done. And you just want to go and see Ben and see Wendy's and eat the food and see the people and just enjoy at Wendy's, 18,000 Chesterfield Airport Road. They're great at Wendy's. And don't forget, coming soon, Wendy's in Defiance, Missouri. So Wendy's is not only great, it's not only fabulous food, but you can eat this food everywhere soon. At least Defiance, for sure. It's a great place, Defiance. I like being defiant. Anyway, it's a great place. Go to Wendy's. You'll love it. Okay. If you're looking for jewelry, you want to go to 4506 Hampton, and you want to talk to Al and AJ, because they will really take good care of you when it comes to buying and selling jewelry, coins, whatever it is you're looking for that you want to buy or sell. They also design jewelry. They'll design it your way, or they'll show you what their creativity can create. They're good. They're very good. And again, it's 4506 Hampton. Jewels on Hampton. Al and AJ, go see them. Enjoy this great business where I'm sure if you're looking for jewels, you'll come out of there with jewels. Trust me. Okay. Now, if you're looking for a suit, well, you know, I got all these suits I wear every day. I just love my suits. And actually, I wear them because I've always felt that they sort of inoculate me from people coming after me for saying bad things, because I look like I'm okay. And especially when you get old enough, then you really look like you're okay, because, you know, why would some old guy dress up in a suit and then talk like a 1960s hippie? Why would you do that? But at any rate, it's a good thing to do. It worked in the 60s, and it's apparently still working. I haven't gotten in too much trouble, but I will say that you can get your own suit if you go to the St. Louis Suit Company in Clayton on the corner of Central and Forsyth. In this case, Jay and Nick, they're the owners. Jay is the father, Nick the son. The rest of the family's always there too. They're just great. It's a fun place to buy men's clothing. And just one thing that they need to work on. And I really expect any day that, you know, I'm going to get a surprise and they're going to call me and say, you know what? We finally sell Chucks, but not yet. No Chucks, but they've got everything else. In the winter, they've got overcoats. In the summer, they've got straw hats. It's the St. Louis Suit Company in Clayton. They've been there 29 years. And as I always say, look for another 29. And that is the St. Louis Suit Company. Okay. I think I've done enough with regard to the trial that is not going on today. Now, tomorrow, it's a different story. Tomorrow, the trial is back in motion, and I seem to think I've heard that it may also be off this Friday. Not sure about that, but I think so. But at any rate, they'll be back in there tomorrow, and the first thing that's going to happen is that Todd Blanche is going to finish up his cross-examination, which, as we've said already, has gone pretty poorly. A lot of people have asked the question, why would Blanche do the cross-examination when he's not a defense attorney? He never has been, and he's a prosecutor. Why would he do it? Probably because Trump makes him. You know, Trump's crazy, so he might be making him do it. In any case, it wasn't done that well. I mean, the experts say it wasn't done very well. They all say that Todd is a great attorney, but that what he did was not so good. So who knows? And will he take a different approach? We'll find out tomorrow. Will he come harder? Well, you would think so, because Trump would probably demand it. Not that it'll keep Trump out of jail, but it might make Trump feel good for about 5 minutes. And apparently, Michael knows how to handle this quite well. He's being pretty straightforward about everything. He's telling about his own emotional feelings, and it seems to be coming across very well with the jury. We'll know the answer to that shortly, because this is the end of the trial, but we'll find this all out tomorrow. And then there's the question, will Alvin Bragg bring on another witness right before the end of this? Maybe somebody that could, look at the law or look at some aspect of the case. I mean, a lot of people say not going to happen. And I believe that really Bragg has already, I think, said he's not going to do it. But some people have thought that, well, he might change his mind. Look, everybody could do anything. But I think that it's probably the end after Michael Cohen for the prosecution, and possibly the end for the defense without ever putting a case on in the first place. I don't know what they would say. Again, maybe somebody to talk about the law and to try to say something that would somehow bail them out. Although that's probably not going to work either, because the judge is going to give legal instructions to the jury before they have to go to deliberate. So really, this is over. I mean, Michael Cohen is going to do his thing tomorrow, and then this is going to be over. And then next week, summations, and then we're on to the jury. And that's where this is. This trial is over. It's just over. So we'll take a look at that and see how that goes. In the meantime, did you want to throw up those three charts for me, Joe? Are you ready for that? Okay, we'll go with that one first. Let's go first with that one. So that is a picture of the Standard & Poor's 500. And what you can see is that there was a peak in 2020, and then the market dropped 40% during COVID. It was 4 weeks and it was over. And then from a low of 2,200, the S&P doubled in less than 2 years, and that's incredible, and went all the way to 4,700. So 4,700 was the top in 2022. And then in 2023, the S&P went to about 4,600, not a new high. That was the 1 year it didn't. And then here we are in 2024 with Joe Biden as the president of the United States. The S&P 500 has moved on to more than 5,300. So keep that chart in mind. You can see for sure that we have been straight up during the Biden presidency. So anybody that wants to say that Donald Trump was better and all this, come on, use your head. You know that's not true. From 2,200 to 5,300, that's 3,100 points. That's what, 130%? It's a pretty big move. Okay, so Joe, let's do the second chart, which would be there. Yeah, there you go. It's exactly what I wanted. So that one is the Russell 2000. And the Russell 2000 has not been able to make a new high for 5 years. Now, I didn't give you 5 years worth. I gave you 1 year. But even in the 1 year, it has not been able to exceed where it was back in April. And it has really not been able to get out of its own way the entire year. The high back at the beginning of the year was 2,000, and it's currently at 2,100. So just a marginal gain for the Russell 2000. And that is what I've explained in the past. It's a narrowing of the market because thousands of stocks are going nowhere while the S&P 500, led by Apple and Amazon and Microsoft, they call them the Fabulous Seven. Well, that's right. That's seven. That's not 500. It's seven. And it's certainly not 2,000, which is the Russell. It's seven. It's really very limited. And that's a problem. It's a big problem. Now, one other thing that I didn't put up there is a chart of high yield bonds. And that I probably won't show ever, but I can just tell you that they've been going down. And high yield bonds are bonds that have questions surrounding them. They might not be able to pay. So they are problematic. And when they go down, as the stock market's going up, it's not good. It's a bad sign. So anyway, all of those are bad signs. And if you're Joe Biden, you're not going to be happy. You can put that back up, Joe. That was good. You could. So, I understand that, but none of that has anything to do with Joe Biden governing. Nothing at all. Now, this last chart that I've got up here does have something to do with governance. And this is the money supply for the United States. And this goes actually back to 1960. So that's 64 years. And you can see way back at the beginning of this chart that it's a very low level of increase. And then it increased at a little quicker pace as it got up to 2010, because back in 2008, they really wanted to sort of give it an extra push to overcome the housing crisis. And then even further, the housing crisis had done some damage. So the Federal Reserve continued to push the money supply higher, 2010, 2015, all the way to 2020. And then in 2020, as you can see, it rocketed up, straight up the money supply. And that was 2021, 22, 23. Now, at the end of all of that, we finally got some inflation. And let me say, going back all those years that I've described, there was no inflation, very little. In fact, towards the 90s and the early 2000s, the Federal Reserve sort of picked up the pace of money supply growth because they wanted more inflation. They couldn't get it. Finally, in 2023, they got some inflation. And we know that there's a lot of talk about it now, not that it makes any sense because it doesn't. But anyway, people are talking about it. Now, if you look at the last 6 months, it's coming down. And that's unusual. The money supply rarely comes down, but in this case, the Federal Reserve is trying to slowly reduce its balance sheet in order to put some pressure on inflation. Is it working? Sure it is. And today, the inflation number came in at 3.5%, which 3.5 versus 3.5 means absolutely nothing. But everybody was celebrating because they've now concluded that the Federal Reserve is going to lower interest rates. And here's the thing. They are. They're going to lower interest rates. I would bet on it. But not because of what anybody is saying right now. People are saying, well, we're going to be in good enough shape on inflation, so it won't matter. No, that's not the reason. The reason is that if the markets begin to tank, and they probably will soon, that will cause the Federal Reserve to move very quickly to try to shore everything up. It's their job. They should do it, and they will. In the meantime, gasoline's selling right now for $3.50. I mean, this is in St. Louis. It could be $2.50 in less than 6 months. It could be. Don't be surprised if it's $2, because once things start down and people get a little crazy, prices can really fall and oil can fall very sharply, and that would bring gas down very quickly. So anyway, I wanted to give you some feel for that, and I wanted you to see what the Federal Reserve is actually doing, because they are trying to put some pressure on. They've raised interest rates, yes, but they're also reducing the money supply because that has an effect as well. And all of that together, it could probably spell a little problem for Joe Biden. But the other side of it is, if the markets get whacked early enough, they could be on their way right back up come the election time. And the funny thing is that's exactly what happened to Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan lived through that. There was a big recession in the middle of his presidency, first term. And what happened is by the time it got to the end of his first term and it was election time, the markets were recovering and people said, hey, this is good. Might be what happens to Joe Biden as well. We'll see. Just something to think about. Thought I'd let you look at some charts since we actually have the technology to do it. So I did it. Anyway, I have a lot of other things planned this week. I'm really looking to talk some immigration later in the week. If I can get the person up here that I want, we will see. I'm not having any success in getting the protesters up here. I'm not sure what their problem is, but I don't know. Suddenly they're a little shy. Something like that. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here, and I will be back tomorrow at 4. See you then for Wenty's, for St. Louis Suit Company, for Jules on Hampton. I'm Mark Kaysen. This is Showdown. Good night.